On a strange alien planet, a human named Jason faces the impossible, snapping his own broken bones back into place. But when an alien girl, Lyra, witnesses this unbelievable feat, she is left in awe and confusion. What makes humans so resilient? As Lyra follows Jason, she uncovers something far more powerful than physical strength, a deep, unshakable will to survive. But as she gets closer, she starts to question, can she understand the true power behind a human's heart? Join Lyra on this unforgettable journey as she discovers what it truly means to be human, and why some things are impossible to break. Hey, yes, if you love thrilling sci-fi stories with a twist, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts. Let's dive into Lyra had always been curious about Earth and its inhabitants. As an alien from Zoria, a distant planet in another galaxy, she had studied humans from afar, learning about their strengths and weaknesses. The rumors were true. Humans were strange, unpredictable, and remarkably strong. But even with all the information she had gathered, nothing could have prepared her for the sight she was about to witness. It was a peaceful evening on Earth, and Lyra had traveled far to study the human race. She found herself standing at the edge of a forest, observing the creatures below. Humans were down there, walking, talking, living their everyday lives. One human in particular caught her attention. He was tall, with dark hair, and his movements were steady, almost calm. The human, Jason, seemed unaware of Lyra's watchful eyes as he moved across the uneven terrain, chatting with a few other humans. They seemed like friends, sharing stories and laughter. Lyra observed them quietly, noting how different their gestures were from the aliens back home. Humans were much more expressive. But suddenly, something unexpected happened. Jason took a step backward, his foot catching on a rock hidden beneath the grass. He fell hard to the ground, his body crumpling under the weight of the fall. There was a loud, sickening crack as his leg twisted unnaturally. Lyra gasped softly. Her heart raced. She had heard of human injuries, but seeing it in person was different. The way his leg bent at an impossible angle made her feel uneasy. Jason groaned in pain, his face twisted in discomfort. Lyra instinctively stepped forward, ready to offer help, but something stopped her. She wasn't sure if humans had a way of healing like the creatures from Zoria did. She had read about their resilience, but she had never seen it for herself. Then, something strange happened. Jason, despite his obvious pain, reached down and grabbed his broken leg. Lyra watched, frozen in place as he took a deep breath, his face hardening with determination. He looked directly at the broken bone. With a swift motion, he snapped the bone back into place. The crack was loud enough that Lyra could hear it from where she stood, even though there was some distance between them. Her eyes widened in shock. What had just happened? Lyra had heard that humans were strong, but this was unlike anything she could have imagined. She had expected him to cry out, to fall back in agony, but instead he simply took a deep breath and slowly rose to his feet. His leg, though still slightly bent, was no longer at an odd angle. He had somehow fixed it himself. Lyra's mind couldn't comprehend what she had just seen. How could a human, a mere Earth creature, have this kind of strength? She had never seen an alien heal this fast, let alone a human. Lyra stood frozen in the shadows, her heart pounding in her chest. The sight of Jason healing himself with such determination left her breathless. This wasn't just physical strength. It was something deeper, something that seemed almost supernatural. She couldn't tear her eyes away. In that moment, Lyra knew one thing for sure. This encounter was going to change everything. What kind of creatures were these humans? And why had she never understood their true power before? Lyra remained hidden, her curiosity growing, wondering what would happen next. Little did she know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would take her deeper into the mysteries of human resilience. Jason stood still for a moment, as if gathering himself. The pain was still there, gnawing at the edges of his mind, but it wasn't the kind of pain that would stop him. Lyra couldn't understand how he could remain so composed, so calm. He had just snapped his own bone back into place, something no creature she had ever encountered could do. How was it possible? And why did he seem so unaffected by it? He took a few steps, testing his leg, and despite the awkwardness in his movement, there was no sign of the sharp, unbearable pain that should have been coursing through his body. Lyra had seen many different species, each with their own way of dealing with injury, but this was different. Humans were not supposed to heal like this. This wasn't how it worked. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of what she had just witnessed, but nothing fit. Unable to tear her gaze away, Lyra stepped closer, her curiosity getting the best of her. Jason, unaware of her presence, continued walking, his eyes focused ahead. She moved silently, blending into the shadows, until she was just a few paces behind him. Something inside her urged her to approach him, to speak to him, but the thought of confronting a human, especially after seeing such an unimaginable act of strength, filled her with hesitation. She had studied humans from afar, but never engaged with one up close. And now, after what she had seen, she felt like she was standing on the edge of something much bigger than she could have ever prepared for. Jason finally slowed down, his face showing a faint grimace. For a brief moment, Lyra thought he might collapse, but instead, he stopped and took a deep breath. His chest expanded as he inhaled, and he exhaled slowly, as though his body had simply accepted the trauma and was already moving forward. His hands flexed, his fingers curling and uncurling as if testing his own limits. It was almost as if he had experienced such pain before and knew how to manage it. This level of endurance, this mental fortitude, it wasn't something that could be learned. It was innate. Lyra could see him more clearly now. He wasn't just any human. He was something different, something beyond the average strength of his kind. What was it that made him so unique? Was it just his physical form, or was there something deeper, something ingrained in the human spirit? Lyra was starting to realize that she had underestimated humans. Their strength didn't come from their bodies alone. It came from their ability to push through pain, to endure suffering, and to rise again, no matter how impossible the situation seemed. She watched as Jason limped a little, but then straightened his posture. He wasn't just walking. He was moving forward with purpose. Every step he took seemed more deliberate, more driven. It was as if the pain had been a reminder, not of weakness, but of how much more he was capable of. Her mind couldn't process it fast enough, her thoughts tangled in confusion and awe. What was it about humans that made them so resilient? Was it just their bodies? Or was there something in their hearts, their minds, that made them capable of doing things no one else could? For a brief moment, Jason stopped again, glancing around the area as if sensing something was off. Lyra quickly hid herself, pressing against the cool bark of a nearby tree. Her heart pounded in her chest, her breath shallow. Did he know she was here? Was it possible he had sensed her presence all along? But Jason just continued walking, his expression unchanged. Lyra stayed where she was, watching him disappear into the distance. There was so much she wanted to understand, so many questions that burned in her mind. She knew this was just the beginning, that her encounter with this human would lead her to answers she had never expected. And perhaps, just perhaps, the answers would change everything she thought she knew about the universe. She couldn't stop herself. She had to follow. Lyra followed Jason from a distance, her steps light and careful, trying to remain unseen. The landscape around her was unfamiliar, yet strangely calming. The vibrant green of Earth's forests seemed to pulse with life, each tree and plant seemingly aware of the creatures that roamed beneath them. She couldn't help but feel a deeper connection to this planet, something she hadn't anticipated before. It was almost as if the very soil beneath her feet held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Jason's movements were steady, but Lyra could still see the slight limp in his stride. He wasn't walking like someone who had just snapped their bones back into place. No, his gait was purposeful, as though he had mastered the art of pushing through the pain. She had to admit, humans were more resilient than she had ever imagined. But it wasn't just his physical strength that fascinated her. There was something about the way he moved, the way he carried himself. That suggested an internal strength far beyond anything Lyra had encountered. She had watched alien species endure pain, battle through hardship, but none of them handled it the way humans did. Jason's ability to endure without showing weakness was something Lyra found both puzzling and strangely admirable. What kind of species were these humans? How could they bear such suffering and emerge stronger for it? Lyra's mind raced as she continued to trail behind him, her curiosity growing with every step. The more she observed Jason, the more questions she had. Why had he not cried out in agony when he fixed his leg? Why did he seem so unfazed by the damage done to his body? She had seen creatures from across the galaxy crumble under less pain. Yet here he was, walking as if nothing had happened. Her thoughts were interrupted when Jason stopped suddenly, as if sensing something was wrong. Lyra froze, instinctively hiding behind a large rock. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to steady her breath. Could he feel her presence? Was he aware that he was being followed? Jason stood still for a few moments, his gaze scanning the surrounding area. Lyra held her breath, hoping that he wouldn't spot her. She didn't know why, but there was a part of her that didn't want him to see her. Not yet. She needed more time to understand, more time to figure out what it was about him that made her feel so drawn to him. He turned and began walking again, this time with a slightly quicker pace, as though his senses were heightened. Lyra decided to give him some space, allowing him to move further ahead. But she couldn't stay away for long. She had to know more. Why was she so intrigued by this human? Was it just his strength? Or was there something deeper that called to her? As the distance between them grew, Lyra felt a strange pull inside her. There was something almost magnetic about Jason, something that made her feel as though she had to keep following him no matter the risk. She had traveled far across galaxies, studied countless species, but never had she felt a connection like this. Jason's silhouette began to fade into the distance, but Lyra couldn't bring herself to stop. She pressed on, moving quietly through the forest, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and wonder. What was she searching for? The answer seemed just out of reach, and yet she couldn't stop herself from chasing it. All she knew for certain was that this human, this creature of Earth, had already shown her a side of strength she never expected to see, and for reasons she couldn't fully explain, she had to know more. Lyra continued to follow Jason, her footsteps barely making a sound on the soft, damp earth beneath her. The forest had grown denser, the trees towering over her like silent sentinels. She moved through the shadows, staying just out of sight, but her mind was consumed with thoughts of the human ahead. There was something about him, something powerful and undeniable, that drew her in. As she walked, Lyra couldn't help but replay the events from earlier in her mind. She had witnessed countless injuries and recoveries during her travels across the galaxy, but nothing like this. There had been no pain that shattered the air, no cries of agony, just a calm, focused determination as Jason had healed himself. It was as if he had been born with the ability to push through anything, no matter how impossible the task seemed. She had seen species endure pain before, but none with such grace. Her thoughts were interrupted when she noticed Jason had stopped again. This time, however, there was no visible sign of injury or discomfort. He stood in a small clearing, looking up at the sky. The soft glow of the setting sun filtered through the leaves, casting a warm light on his face. He was deep in thought, seemingly unaware of the alien watching him from the shadows. Lyra took a careful step forward, intrigued by the sudden stillness that surrounded him. For a moment, she wondered if he was waiting for something. But no, his eyes were fixed on the sky and his posture was relaxed. It was as if he was momentarily at peace, detached from the world around him. Lyra, still hidden, observed him closely. The longer she watched, the more she realized that there was something almost otherworldly about his calmness. It wasn't just his physical strength that set him apart. It was the way he carried himself, as if nothing could shake his resolve. Was this a human trait, or was Jason somehow different from the others? The more Lyra watched, the more she felt a strange pull toward him. It was as though his presence had become magnetic, drawing her closer despite every instinct that told her to stay hidden. She found herself captivated by his stillness, a kind of quiet strength that radiated from him like an invisible force. How could a species so young, so fragile in appearance, possess such an unshakable core? Jason sighed deeply, as if letting go of something heavy. He seemed to snap out of his trance, and in that moment, Lyra saw the vulnerability in his eyes. It was brief, fleeting, but it was there. She wondered if he was struggling with something. Did humans carry burdens like the other species she had encountered? Could their unbreakable resilience be tied to hidden struggles, to pains they kept buried deep inside? Before Lyra could dwell on it further, Jason began to move again, this time with a sense of purpose. He was heading toward a nearby river, his pace steady and determined. Lyra followed from a safe distance, still unsure of what drove her to pursue him so relentlessly. She had studied many cultures and species, but none had captured her attention quite like this human. What was it about Jason that made him so fascinating? It wasn't just his strength, nor his ability to endure. There was something deeper, something that connected him to her on a level she couldn't quite explain. She found herself yearning to understand him, to know the story behind the quiet strength that seemed to define him. As they reached the river's edge, Jason paused once more, looking down at the flowing water. Lyra lingered in the shadows, unable to move. Was this the moment she would finally reveal herself to him? Or was there something else that she needed to uncover first? She didn't know the answers yet, but one thing was certain. Her journey with this human was far from over. Jason stood by the riverbank, his eyes fixed on the water flowing swiftly beneath the twilight sky. The evening air was cool, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and leaves. His mind was a whirlwind, filled with thoughts he hadn't let himself explore until now. He had always been a man of action, a man who focused on the immediate, surviving, enduring, moving forward. But today, something had shifted. The encounter with Lyra, the alien who had been watching him, had stirred something deep within him, something he couldn't quite name. He had noticed her shadow in the trees earlier, though he hadn't acknowledged it until now. She had been following him, tracking his every move, yet there was no fear in her. Jason couldn't remember the last time someone had silently observed him without fear. She was curious, intrigued even, but not in the way most beings reacted to a human in an alien world. Lyra didn't seem intimidated. She seemed fascinated. The thought made him uneasy. Jason ran a hand through his hair, turning his gaze back to the river. He had known that humans were different in many ways, but he hadn't realized just how much of an impact he could make. His strength, his ability to endure pain, to keep moving forward no matter what, was something he had always taken for granted. He hadn't thought about it much, but now, standing on this foreign planet, he wondered if it was something that set humans apart in ways he hadn't fully understood. He had always believed his resilience came from necessity, from a drive to survive. But was it more than that? Was there something deeper in the human spirit that made them capable of pushing through the unimaginable? The sound of footsteps behind him brought him out of his thoughts. Slowly, he turned around, expecting to see nothing but empty space. But there, standing in the shadows of the trees, was Lyra. She was silent, just as she had been before, but this time, there was no mistaking her presence. She had come closer than she ever had before. Jason took a deep breath, his heart beating a little faster than it should have been. He wasn't sure what to make of her, or of the way her eyes seemed to study him with a quiet intensity. She wasn't like anyone he had ever encountered, alien or human. "Why are you following me?" His voice broke the silence, sharp and direct. He didn't mean to sound aggressive, but the curiosity was eating at him. He had to know why she was here, why she had been tracking his every move. Lyra didn't flinch at his question. Instead, she stepped forward, the soft crunch of leaves beneath her feet the only sound as she approached. Her gaze never wavered from his. "I'm not following you," she said quietly, her voice oddly calm. "I'm trying to understand you." Jason raised an eyebrow, taken aback. "Understand me?" She nodded slowly. "You humans? You're not like anything I've encountered before. I've seen many species endure pain, but never like this. Never with such resolve." Jason's eyes narrowed, the tension between them thickening. "What do you mean?" Lyra hesitated, then took a step closer. "I watched you earlier, when you healed yourself. I've seen others recover, but you were different. It's as if the pain didn't affect you at all." Jason looked away, a wave of discomfort washing over him. He didn't like talking about his strength, about his ability to keep going when everything around him screamed to stop. It wasn't something he understood, something he felt comfortable sharing. But the alien girl, Lyra, was different. She was unlike any creature he'd met, and something about her presence made him feel exposed, like she could see right through him. "You're right," he said, his voice softer now. "It's not easy, but it's how I've learned to survive." Lyra stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "I don't understand. How can you push through such pain and still remain so strong? I've seen beings break, physically and mentally, but you humans, there's something in you that keeps you moving. It's not just physical strength, is it?" Jason swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling deep within him. He didn't have an answer. He had never stopped to think about it, but now, in front of her, it seemed like the most important question of all. Lyra's gaze softened, and for a moment, it felt as though she understood something he didn't. "Perhaps it's not just the body that's strong. Maybe it's the mind. The will to keep going. Maybe that's why you're so different." Jason met her gaze, his heart racing in his chest. Maybe you're right. But there was more to it. Something Jason couldn't quite put into words. Something he was just beginning to understand himself. Lyra was silent for a moment, then spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't know what's more fascinating, the strength you have or the fact that you don't fully understand it yourself." Jason didn't have an answer to that either. But as he stood there, facing her, something inside him began to shift. Perhaps it wasn't just the human body that was resilient. Perhaps it was something more. Something he needed to discover. And maybe, just maybe, Lyra could help him understand it. Jason stood there in silence, the weight of Lyra's words sinking in deeper than he cared to admit. He had always known that his body was strong, resilient, but he had never stopped to question the source of that strength. It had always been a part of him, like an instinct, a drive to keep moving forward no matter the odds. But standing here with Lyra, an alien, someone from a completely different world, he couldn't ignore the possibility that there was something more at play. Lyra's eyes remained locked on him, her gaze piercing and steady, as though she was waiting for him to unravel the answers himself. Jason felt an unsettling mix of vulnerability and curiosity stir within him. He had always been the one who pushed others to keep going, to endure whatever came their way. But now, for the first time in a long while, he felt as though he was the one being examined, the one who needed to find the strength within himself to keep going. "I don't have all the answers," Jason said, breaking the silence. His voice was quieter than usual, as if the weight of his own thoughts was pressing down on him. "I don't know why I push through. I just do." Lyra nodded slowly, absorbing his words, her expression unreadable. "It's not just about surviving, is it?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. "It's about something deeper. Something that's part of who you are. You can't just turn it off." Jason's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Lyra took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Humans, you don't just survive. You live through the pain. You embrace it, even when it threatens to break you. That's what makes you different." Jason's heart skipped a beat at her words. There it was again, that sense of being understood in a way he couldn't quite explain. She was right. He didn't just survive. He embraced the challenges that life threw at him, pushing through each one with a fierce determination. But why? Why had he never questioned it before? "I never really thought about it that way," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. Lyra's gaze softened, and for the first time, Jason saw a flicker of something more than just curiosity in her eyes, something like empathy. "It's because you have something inside you that refuses to let go," she said gently. "That's what makes you human." The simplicity of her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always thought of humans as fragile beings, bound by limits, forced to fight for survival. But maybe Lyra was right. Maybe it wasn't just about physical endurance or the will to survive. It was about the spirit, the part of him that refused to break no matter what. He exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his chest begin to loosen, if only for a moment. There was still so much he didn't understand, so much that he needed to learn. But as he stood there, facing this alien girl who had challenged everything he thought he knew, he couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity beginning to form. Maybe this was just the beginning of something much bigger than he could ever have imagined. And maybe, just maybe, Lyra had unlocked a truth about him that he had been too blind to see. "You might be right," Jason said, his voice stronger now. "Maybe it's not about just surviving. Maybe it's about really living through it all." Lyra didn't answer immediately. She only nodded, her gaze still fixed on him. And for the first time since their paths had crossed, Jason felt like he might just be on the edge of understanding something that would change everything. The silence between them stretched out, heavy with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Jason stood there, his mind turning over the conversation, but his body still responding to the unrelenting ache in his leg. The pain was a distant hum now, but the physical toll had begun to fade, replaced by the quiet tug of Lyra's words. They lingered in his mind like a melody he couldn't quite place. Lyra, too, seemed lost in thought, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for answers in the vast expanse of the world around them. Jason watched her, wondering what she saw when she looked at him. Was she still trying to figure him out? Or had she already reached conclusions about humans that he hadn't yet grasped himself? The river beside them continued to flow, its gentle rush of water acting as a backdrop to their quiet exchange. For the first time since their encounter, Jason felt like he wasn't just a human in a foreign world. He felt like he was a part of something much bigger. This wasn't just about surviving or enduring. There was a deeper connection between them, something he couldn't quite explain. And yet, it was undeniable. "I never really thought about it before," Jason said, breaking the stillness. His voice was more reflective now, quieter than before, as if he was speaking more to himself than to her. "About why I keep going, even when everything seems to fall apart." Lyra turned her head toward him, her gaze soft, as though she understood the weight behind his words. "Humans don't just survive," she said quietly, repeating herself from earlier, but now with a deeper understanding. "You find purpose in the struggle. It shapes you in ways that make you stronger than the pain itself." Jason nodded slowly, the truth of her words sinking in. He had always pushed forward, always tried to carry the weight of his struggles with pride, never stopping to examine the reasons why. But now, in this moment, with Lyra standing before him, he was beginning to see the larger picture. "Maybe that's it," he said, more to himself than to her. "Maybe the struggle isn't what breaks you. It's what makes you who you are." Lyra stepped closer, her eyes still fixed on him. "You're not alone in this. It's not just the pain that defines you, it's how you rise above it, how you keep going even when the world tries to push you down." Jason's heart quickened as the realization struck him with more clarity than he had ever felt. The human experience wasn't defined by weakness or vulnerability. It was defined by the moments when you faced your pain head-on and came out stronger. It was the act of continuing when it seemed impossible, of finding the strength to push through even the darkest moments. And it wasn't just physical strength. It was emotional, mental, and spiritual resilience. He looked at Lyra, his heart pounding with something new, something unspoken. "Thank you," he said softly, though the words seemed too small for what he was feeling. But they were the only words he could find at that moment. Lyra smiled, a small, knowing smile. She didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. The understanding between them was clear, unspoken, yet deeply felt. In this strange, unfamiliar world, Jason had found a connection with someone who, despite being so different, had shown him the value of embracing what it meant to truly live. As they stood there side by side, Jason realized that this was only the beginning of a deeper journey, not just through the strange world of Zoria, but into the heart of what it meant to be human.